He set out for a simple morning jog, headphones in, shoes pounding the sidewalk, the quiet rhythm of another ordinary day. But before he could finish his first mile, suspicious eyes were already watching. Calls were being made. Rules, ones that had never been written, were suddenly being enforced. What began as a run turned into a nightmare that rippled through the whole neighborhood. How could something so innocent become a supposed crime? And why do stories like his keep happening again and again? It was just another Saturday morning for Marcus, a quiet man who found peace in routine. Coffee poured, laces tied, sun just breaking over the rooftops of his suburban neighborhood. This jog was his daily ritual, a way to clear his mind before the world woke up. The streets were lined with trimmed hedges, pastel houses, and those ever-watchful HOA signs reminding everyone to keep the community safe. Marcus liked this place. He'd worked hard for it. A good job, a tidy home, a neighborhood where his young son could ride his bike without worry. Or so he thought. But as he turned onto Maple Drive, that familiar comfort began to feel different. A curtain shifted. A gate sensor blinked red. Eyes followed him, not with recognition, but suspicion. Something was about to go terribly wrong, and for reasons Marcus couldn't yet understand, he would become the story everyone was talking about. Marcus's pace was steady, his breath measured, until he felt it. That prickling awareness that someone was watching. At first, he told himself it was nothing, a passing car, a neighbor grabbing the paper. But then came the second look, and the third. Curtains flickered open like suspicious eyes. A man standing by his mailbox paused too long, phone camera raised just so. Marcus adjusted his earbuds and kept jogging. He didn't want trouble. But trouble, it seemed, didn't need his invitation. Up ahead, a white SUV idled at the curb. Its engine hummed low, matching his rhythm. When he turned at the corner, the vehicle crept forward, slow and deliberate. By the third block, it was undeniable. It was following him. Inside the vehicle sat two members of the HOA's Community Watch, clipboards in hand, their badges of authority entirely self-appointed. One raised a phone, snapping photos as Marcus jogged past. They whispered to each other, eyes narrowing as if documenting evidence. One of them finally rolled down the window. Marcus caught only fragments. Doesn't live here. Suspicious. Call it in. His pulse quickened. His jog turned stiff, cautious. He thought about saying something, but years of knowing how these stories ended stopped him mid-thought. Words could easily be mistaken for aggression. Silence was safer. Halfway down the street, another car joined in. A neighbor he recognized, barely. She slowed too, window lowered. "Everything okay out here?" She asked someone, but not him. She was talking to the men behind. Marcus turned onto his own block, past the oak tree he'd planted last spring. Relief flickered, brief as a breath. Home was just ahead. But flashing lights cut through the morning calm. A patrol car, waiting. The officer stepped out, hand resting on his belt. The HOA had made their call. Suspicious male, possible trespasser. That was the report. No mention that Marcus lived here, paid dues here, waved to these same neighbors every day. When the officer asked for ID, Marcus complied, voice even though his hands trembled. Each second stretched thin, heavy with the memory of every headline he'd ever read. The officer checked his license, then the address. Everything matched, and still, the officer didn't lower his guard. Neighbors began to gather. Phones up. Whispers. The same people who once borrowed his ladder now watched as if witnessing a crime. Marcus stood there, both visible and invisible. The officer's radio crackled. The community watched. The moment froze, suspended between safety and something far worse. Then came the order that wasn't a request. "Stay right where you are," Marcus did. But inside something broke. The illusion that belonging was protection. That success made him safe. And as the air around him thickened with suspicion, one thought burned in his mind: how fast it takes for a home to stop feeling like home. The officer's voice hardened, sharp as the morning air. "Stop right there," he said again, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch. The flashing blue lights painted his skin in cold, strobing color, proof to anyone watching that something must be wrong. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus obeyed. Slowly, carefully, palms open toward the sky that seemed to press down on him. His heart hammered in his chest, not from running, but from the fragile weight of knowing this moment could decide everything. He tried to speak, to explain, his address, his morning jog, even his son waiting inside the house just a few doors down, but his voice came out thin, almost swallowed by the murmurs of the crowd forming behind the police car. The neighbors' phones gleamed like tiny spotlights, capturing his humiliation, not his truth. The officer circled him like a shadow. Each question carried the presumption of guilt. "Where are you coming from?" "What are you doing here?" "Do you live in this community?" Marcus answered, steady as he could, but the tone between them was already set. Then came the sound. Backup sirens. Another car, another uniform. The air grew heavier, charged with a fear Marcus couldn't hide if he tried. A neighbor spoke up, saying, "He's lived here for years," but the voices of doubt were louder. Another muttered something about new residents. Another said, "We just want safety." Safety, apparently, from him. Marcus stood in the middle of his own street, surrounded by the place he once called home, watching strangers debate if he belonged here at all. And when the officer finally lowered his hand from his weapon, not because he believed Marcus, but because he couldn't prove otherwise, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving only whispers floating in the uneasy air. Marcus realized something no apology could fix. The danger had passed, but the damage had already been done. What do you do when your innocence isn't enough? When the police cars finally left, the neighborhood fell silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy quiet that comes after a storm, when everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. Marcus walked home under the same trees, past the same mailboxes, but the weight in his chest made each step harder. The air itself seemed changed, tainted by the echo of suspicion. He made it to his front door, safe on paper, but his spirit was bruised in places no one could see. His son peeked out from the window, confused. Marcus tried to smile, but it trembled. How could he explain that doing everything right hadn't protected him? That even in his own neighborhood, his skin had been the crime? Days later, some neighbors avoided his glance. Others offered apologies that sounded more like self-defense than remorse. The HOA sent an email calling it a misunderstanding. But Marcus knew better. Misunderstandings don't come with flashing lights and trembling hands. They come from fear, taught fear, and the silence that allows it to survive. So he spoke up. He shared his story at community meetings, on social media, wherever someone would listen. He didn't need pity. He needed people to see what he'd seen, how fragile belonging feels when it's conditional. His story spread far beyond his quiet street. Some dismissed it. Others recognized their own reflection in it. And still, the question lingered. How many times must the same story unfold before something truly changes? Marcus jogs again now. Same route, different eyes watching. But this time, he runs not just for peace, but for proof. Proof that he's still here, that fear hasn't won, and that his story, like too many others, isn't just his to carry. Because until justice runs freer than fear, none of us are really home.